Okay. Can you hear me online? All right. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and get started for today. So I want to thank our four panelist speakers that we have today. We're going to be so STS, as you all know, has many skills that are transferable to many careers and fields and areas of study. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting four of our STS alumni who have taken their STS skills and transferred them to non-academic fields. Today, they'll talk about their experiences doing that and how they got there. Um, so we'll begin this conversation with a brief introduction by our four panelists. I already shared some questions with them beforehand. I'll go over those briefly before they introduce themselves. But after we go over the brief introduction, we'll open up the floor to Q&A. So those, and then we'll, and they'll have about 8 minutes to do that. But our introductory questions that we have are: what is your role, or what do you do for your organization? What was your career path, and how did your STS degree fit into that? What opportunities are you aware of for people with master degrees or PhDs in STS? What should grad students be doing now to acquire the skills for a career in your field? So we'll just go ahead and go in order of our speakers, which I forgot to introduce. So let me introduce them. So we have Amanda Phillips de Lucas, Director of Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance. Then we have Samantha Fried, Associate Director of Civic Studies at Tufts University. Then we have Josh Penrod, Vice President at Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association. And then we'll end with Jennifer Tucker, Director of the USDA's National Organics Program. So we'll go ahead and go in order of that introduction. So we'll go ahead and start with Amanda.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Phillips de Lucas, and I'm the director of the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance. We are a self-supported research institute at the University of Baltimore, but self-supported just fundamentally means I fund me and my whole staff to run the organization. We just happen to be located within a university. So what do we do? The Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, or BNIA, has been around in Baltimore for over 25 years. And we were founded at sort of a moment where there was a push nationwide to do what are called neighborhood informatics. So collecting data, but looking at it at the neighborhood level, instead of like citywide. So we release a report every year called Vital Signs, which tracks we call it the health of neighborhoods in Baltimore City, and we look at that across 8 topic areas, including everything from like demographics to sustainability to arts and culture. So our core activity is Vital Signs, and then an event we put on in July called Baltimore Data Day, which brings approximately 300 folks from around the city to learn about data and projects that are ongoing in the city. Beyond that, the sort of bread and butter of what we do is contract work with organizations within Baltimore City and sometimes within the state of Maryland. So what that looks like on paper is everything from program evaluations, did a particular program or project work or have its intended outcome. We also do sort of technical analysis or like a support for reports. So we might get called in by the Department of Housing and Community Development to build out some tables for like a required HUD report. And then we also do research projects. So sort of your more fundamental NSF work, but we've also worked with folks at Johns Hopkins studying the impact of vacant lots on adolescent health. And we're also working with the University of Maryland on a sort of transportation tracking tool. So we do sort of applied research, more sort of basic research, and then our core activities. In total, we're about a $500,000 shop, sort of in and out every year. And so that's kind of what we need to be supported. So I supervise how many people? 4 people right now, but that can fluctuate a little bit depending on how many students we have working or how many projects we have ongoing at any point in time. We are a part of a larger group called the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership. So there are other organizations who do this work nationwide. Sort of broadly, that group is staffed by a few PhDs in general, but across a lot of different topic areas. I would say everything from public health to community development to planning. So it's a really kind of interdisciplinary space that we work in and that everyone kind of steps into. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily, well, it's a very good footing for folks in STS, the sort of intersection of urban work, community planning, and sort of how our neighborhoods developing. But it also means that the folks you are working with have very different expertise. And I think there's a lot to learn from folks who have sort of a formal PhD in community planning or urban development. And that was kind of a large adjustment for me, which is sort of how are those folks bringing their own expertise into the sort of shared space that we work in. So that's sort of what I do and my career path. So right before graduating with my PhD from Virginia Tech, I got a postdoc with an organization called the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies. With that postdoc, they're actually located in upstate New York, but I was positioned down in Baltimore and actually worked out of a U.S. Forest Service field site. There's an urban field station network all across the U.S., and my postdoc was in the urban field station. And for that, I was studying perceptions of green infrastructure in Baltimore City. My dissertation had been about Baltimore City I was using archives to study that work, but this was sort of my first time working in the city proper. And it was important for my postdoc supervisors that I be located in Baltimore to sort of do the work that they wanted done at that point in time. The field station had a long connection with Baltimore, and doing that sort of engaged socio-ecological research. And so it was a really interesting placement, both well outside of my discipline, but also it gave me the opportunity to learn about and really get established in a place. And I think if I was going to give kind of big advice to, where is the applicability of like an STH PhD, it's in that kind of place-based work, but that takes an investment both in your time and in sort of building out relationships with folks who live and work in that area. I would say that networking looks a lot different than what you might anticipate in higher education. It's a lot more informal. It's showing up to places, anything from community meetings to just like bars and coffee shops, and being sort of visible within the place that you live and work. And that was kind of what I did for my postdoc. But 2020 happened and everything shut down, and things got really quiet. And that was really the moment when my postdoc funding ran out and I was looking for jobs. So for me, that included applying to a lot of academic positions. And eventually I ended up in a grant writing position for Carey Institute. When I say I hated this job, I hated this job to like the core of my being. I never wanted to do grant writing. It was miserable working with the scientists at Carey who I was basically supposed to get program grants for. And they were like, I just want to do my research. I don't want it to be applied. Why would you be talking to me? But that was my whole job, was to try to get foundation grants. Well, it turns out that the head of Carey Institute really, really liked me and was fine with me not being overly successful at getting grants. But I basically spent a year and a half of my life trying to get grants for Carey Institute before coming into my current role, where what I do 90% of the day is writing grant applications at this moment in time. That's what my whole job is, aside from supervising and sometimes doing like project work. Most of what I do is just business development for the organization. And I happen to really like it in this particular role, which really means that you cannot like the function of something, but it can just be applied differently, and it's a lot of fun. But that sort of second kind of both opportunities and how do you prepare, it's sometimes taking that job outside of the academy to get that skill set that's going to look good on paper. I'll also say that the current job I'm in, I did not apply for when it was initially posted. The first person who stepped down from the role previously was like a force in Baltimore City. She still is, but I saw her in this role and I was like, nope, that's not me. That's well beyond where I'm at in my current career. And a bunch of my like colleagues reached out to me and said, you should apply for this. And I said, nope, not what I'm looking for, not what I'm interested in. And about after like 3 months of that, and the position was still open, I got like a fifth poke, like, hey, why haven't you applied for this? And I said, okay, I'll do it. But I emailed their assistant director and I was like, hey, tell me what you guys are looking for in this job, because I'm on the fence about whether I actually want to apply to it. And I had a lot of good conversations with the folks on staff before I even like submitted an application. But then once I submitted the application, it was pretty much a direct path to getting hired. So I think it's that also that sort of building your network and folks so that if something does come out of the pipeline, you know who to talk to, and to have sort of the conversations that are less formal about whether or not this would be like a good career fit one way or another.
Hey, Amanda, I want to make sure we have enough time, but we can come back to those during the Q&A. But I want to have some time for
Yes.
Sam to go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Freed, and I am Associate Director of the Civic Studies Program and Assistant Research Professor at the Jonathan M. Tisch College of Civic Life at Tufts. And at the risk of disclosing something very scandalous, I'm primarily an administrator. I started as a civic science postdoc at Tufts in June of 2019. And then I started transitioning to administrative work as a program manager in January of 2020. Actually, when I started becoming a program manager, a colleague of mine said, "Don't do that. You'll never write or publish or do research again." And I knew that they have my best interests at heart. And they're a little bit right. I don't have as much time to publish or do my own research, though I can still do some of it. But I wanted a stable position. I still wanted to be at a university. I wanted to put down roots somewhere. So, everything is a trade-off. There's a lot of talk about administrative bloat in the academy, and I will not deny that this is a general problem. I will not confirm it either. However, I sometimes fear that the criticism around administrative bloat has led to a general apathy, maybe even antipathy among academics around actually understanding administrative work. And that can make it hard to envision what you'd actually do with your time as an administrator and what it takes to be one. There are quite a few administrators like me at Tufts, many of whom work for interdisciplinary academic programs. They are generally program managers or directors, and the work can vary based on the program. So I do work that I would say falls into roughly 3 buckets. I'll call the first bucket tedious and essential. I'll call the second bucket programmatic theory and frameworks. And then there's this third bucket that's a trading zone, to point to Collins, Evans, and Gorman between the first two buckets. So maybe it's more of a dam than a bucket. I'm not going to explore that metaphor too much. So in the tedious and essential category, there's a lot of management, managing budgets, managing processes, like hiring processes, and sometimes managing people and relationships in all different directions. These tasks are largely invisible to anyone outside of civic studies and to anyone who is not an administrator until they break down, that is, as Susan Lee Starr says. So here's an example of one. You know how you register for courses online? That information, the course itself, the instructor, the time, the requirement it fulfills, it has to get there somehow, generally because a person collects it from faculty and puts it there on a glitchy and bureaucratic online platform that communicates with other glitchy and bureaucratic online platforms. I used to do that for 2 programs, but now I manage someone who does that for 1 program, Civic Studies. And actually, a lot of what I'm trying to show them is how the tedious work and the more theoretical, bigger picture work come together. I've now been an administrator for almost 6 years, doing everything from the most infuriatingly clunky data entry to collaborating with our office for the vice provosts of research around the framing of civic ideals and research. And a conviction I've come to hold is that the best kind of administrator puts the tedious stuff and the ideological stuff into conversation. Everything has a greater purpose and an established process. It's often our own assumptions about distribution of labor and hierarchy that keep us from thinking about administration and institutions in this way. So the more theoretical, ideological work for me looks like curriculum development, faculty governance and liaisonship, and collaborative research and projects. You're probably familiar with Thomas Guerin's boundary work, so you might be keen on the idea that interdisciplinary programs have to do a lot of important boundary work. Civic studies, like STS, is a global and interdisciplinary field, but unlike STS, it's only about 20 years old. So as a program, we often ask ourselves questions like, how do we draw boundaries around this field of study and how it manifests specifically at Tufts? What do students need to learn to consider themselves well-versed in this field? What components does a course need to have to be considered a civic studies course? I'm always making little tweaks to how I answer those questions for myself, and I'm always trying to find grounded, process-oriented, and collaborative ways to answer them. For instance, I'm currently developing a course that I'll teach in the spring about the role of knowledge in civic action. So teaching, curriculum development, planning and running events, advising, some community partnership building, and grant writing all fall into this trading zone space, for me at least, between the really big picture stuff and the micro level bureaucratic stuff. So I've tried to give you a sense through these explanations of how thinking like an STSer helped me in my job, but I will be even more explicit. STS is an investigation into formalized knowledge, and universities create that formalized knowledge. So when I'm doing some tedious bureaucratic thing, I'm often asking myself questions like, how and why did this process come to be? How does this process contribute to or validate the knowledge output of the university? And how could this process be more effective to that end? I always kind of feel like I'm doing an ethnography of infrastructure, to point to Starr again. So how do you find a role like this? You should have an openness to administrative work, a general belief in institutions, and a commitment to changing them from the inside out. An awareness that these kinds of roles exist because they tend to pop up a lot once you start to notice them. A willingness to give a damn about process improvement, and a good dose of being in the right place at the right time, which I was. Happy to say more about that in the Q&A. And regarding relationship building, Working on a team, I think, is its own skill. Relationship building is super important in administrative work. So I recommend finding opportunities to build that skill if you're interested. The academic humanities can be isolating. I have found it isolating, being a grad student, and I don't think humanistic fields really encourage collaboration as much as STEM. So you would need to seek out opportunities where you consistently, like year in and year out, work on team-based projects, probably through a club, an organization, association, government body. I spent 3 years on the executive board of the Graduate Student Assembly, which isn't that anymore. It's the Graduate and Professional Student Senate, I think. That really helped me develop skills that I use in my job all the time.
Hey, Sam.
The last thing I'll say, it helps to learn how to write polite and direct, yet information-dense emails. These are in some ways the opposite of a dissertation. I cannot stress enough the importance of this as an art form, which I learned on the job and I'm still learning. So I'll end by saying something that I really mean. Everything I needed to land my job, I learned at Virginia Tech. Through the STS department and through student government. So if you're interested in administrative work, I think you actually have everything you need to do this kind of work. And I'm always happy to be a resource for you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. We'll go ahead and go to Josh now.
Hi, everybody. Happy Friday afternoon. My name's Josh Penrod. I graduated from Virginia Tech, the Northern Virginia campus, in 2018. I finished my dissertation then. I have been working at the same organization now for nearly 22 and a half years. So if you can do the math or the logic very quickly, you know that I had the position before I had my PhD, although it has gone through a couple of iterations before and since. So in short, I work for industry. In particular, I work for a trade association that represents collectors of human plasma and the manufacturers of the finished therapeutic derivatives. Hence the wonderful name Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association that just rolls right off the tongue. I started there in 2003 as manager of regulatory policy, and I had already done graduate work. By then, I was a lawyer, still am a lawyer, and had done additional graduate work at GW. And being in an organization for a very, very long period of time, like I've worn a number of hats over that time. But a couple of things have been kind of steady throughout that, which is, gaining in responsibility. And my current title, such as it is Senior Vice President, Global Plasma and Technical Advocacy, I think is what it is. Another thing, whenever you reach enough seniority in an organization, you stop paying attention to stuff like that. And just as long as the checks keep coming in, that's good enough. So, but what does that mean? It means that basically I'm responsible for the membership's efforts in the regulatory sphere with the FDA, European Medicines Agency, Therapeutic Goods Administration of Australia, various regulatory agencies throughout China, throughout Asia, including China, South America, Africa, and so on. During my time, I've been fortunate to be able to work with a very, very gifted group of people, both my colleagues at PPTA and boards of directors that I've reported to over the years, responsible for essentially all of our regulatory policy, scientific affairs, medical affairs, standard setting, a lot of advocacy in front of legislative bodies, judicial, administrative, primarily administrative agencies with the federal government. Our organization is located in Washington, D.C., Annapolis, Maryland, Brussels, Belgium. We used to have an office in Tokyo as well, which I visited a few times, but we wound that up. But I've had a colossally interesting career, given the fact that I've basically represented this industry on 5 different continents, and been able to engage with countless different experts, cultures, degrees of healthcare system development, a number of things. It's hard to encapsulate that length of time for whenever I've been doing it. And it's only been recently that I've been able to begin to assimilate the fact that I'm now the old guy in the room compared to what seems like yesterday and was in fact 20 years ago. Um, so in addition to that, I also teach. I am an adjunct professor at the Merrick School of Business at the University of Baltimore. Hi, Amanda. Good to see you there. Um, I've had some success with that. I won a teaching award from the Merrick School back around 2020. It was overshadowed considerably by COVID. I also won the Richard Booker University Award last year or the year before for best teaching from adjunct. So, been primarily teaching at the School of Business, but I've also picked up a few courses in public policy, including at Southern New Hampshire University. Um, I have written a bunch of different things. I've had some peer-reviewed pieces, some of which came out as a result of my dissertation. I also have four books, one of which was a direct adaptation of my dissertation. It was on the ethics of neuromarketing, applying some of the thought of Michel Foucault. Also have two books on local industrial history. I'm from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, which is where I'm at right now. Hi, Ashley. Thank you for that. Ashley was on my dissertation committee, as is my former chair, Janet Abate. I see her on as well. And Matt and I worked together on another project whenever I taught a couple of courses for Virginia Tech many years ago as well. So two books on the industrial history of Johnstown, one Johnstown Industry and the other Johnstown Waters, that came out earlier this year, published through the Arcadia Press and the History Press. Also just recently released as a novel, published through Sunbury under their Catamount imprint, These Restless Hills, which is a historical novel set in Gilded Age in a steel industry town, Johnstown in particular, 1889. And so those of you who might be familiar with mass casualty events, familiar with the Great Johnstown Flood of 1889, and I will let you go purchase the book at either Amazon or Sunbury. In addition to, I'm sort of going a little bit circular here, but in addition to the PhD from Virginia Tech, I think this warrants a little bit of context. I'm also, as I mentioned, an attorney. I graduated from law school 25 years ago, passed the bar exam. I have advanced graduate degrees in environmental law and occupational health and environmental health. I have an MBA, and I also did a postdoc at the University of Florida at the Warrington College of Business on pedagogy and a number of things within various business and management disciplines. So that's a fairly convoluted and apparently likely tedious recounting of my career and my role. So I guess the question of where does STS fit in, and obviously the easiest ones that I was able to, thank you, Matt, that I was able to cotton on to really has been the exploration of medical ethics and bioethics, both in what I did and what I do as a vocation. I think that a lot of the work that I did, particularly outside of the dissertation, because I was kind of torn between dissertation topics. I remember having a conversation with Janet many years ago where I was sort of casting around for a dissertation topic, and I had thought about knowledge as a technology, and I thought, well, double entry bookkeeping was a tremendous invention about 1,000 years ago. The Knights Templar were deeply involved in that. How about if I explore the Knights Templar and their institution of double entry bookkeeping and banking and so on? And I think I can speak for Janet. She took a very, very long breath and stared at me for a few moments and said, "You're not doing a dissertation on the Knights Templar, Josh." So, okay, got that. So I ended up with doing one on neuromarketing instead. But so all of the things that both Amanda and Sam mentioned in terms of boundary work and a lot of the facilitation of different viewpoints, different disciplines. STS is an inherently interdisciplinary discipline, and that's one of the things that really attracted me to it after having already established a career and in an organization. So there are, it's essential and interchangeable with a lot of other skills that you can bring. And I'm not the most vigorously active person on social media with LinkedIn or Instagram or anything like that, but anytime I see something come out from the program, I try to repost it because I do think it's a discipline that warrants greater attention and certainly a lot of good work going on there for many years from many different scholars now. And I think I'll kind of defer the other two questions for later Q&A. I want to give enough time here for Jennifer to talk, but I'm happy to elocute a little bit more about some of the other things because I think that one of the things that Amanda and Sam both alluded to, as well as being flexible, being light on your feet, being able to change, and even though I might be the poster child for the opposite of that by staying in an organization for more than 2 decades. You can't stay relevant in an organization for more than 2 decades. I can give you my boss's phone number and you can ask her if I've stayed relevant or not, but I think I have, and it's just being able to have that flexibility and youth of mind, I would say, that STS really brings, where you can focus on a topic looking through many, many different important lenses.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Josh. We'll go ahead and go to Jennifer now.
Hi, everyone. I really actually love going last. It's so great to kind of hear other folks' stories here. So my name is Jenny Tucker. What is my role and what do I do? I run the National Organic Program, which is part of the USDA, Department of Agriculture. And I've been in that program for about 14 years. I now lead it. So what does that mean? I do a lot of administration. In fact, my official title is Deputy Administrator. So there you go. So that means I lead a team that ranges anywhere between about 55 to 85 people, depending on whether we're in a hiring surge or not, or a hiring freeze. So at the National Organic Program, we define the standards that are behind that USDA organic seal. So if you go to the grocery store and you reach out for a product that has the USDA organic seal, it's one of the more recognizable brands out there. We are the group that defines what those standards are, that we facilitate the process for deciding that. And then we enforce it. We oversee the organizations that are actually out there certifying organic farms and businesses. And if someone's breaking the rules, we pursue legal action to stop them from doing that. We also run a bunch of trade systems so that we can oversee imports of organic products. It is a global standard. And so you can be anywhere in the world and get certified to the USDA organic seal. It is truly a global system. And so you literally have about 55 people right now overseeing a $71 billion industry measured in US sales. So I oversee all of those activities. So that's what I do on a daily basis. My career path, I actually started my career as a geologist. I started as at an environmental cleanup site. It was a hazardous waste cleanup site in the very first round of base closure and realignment acts sites. And so I was wearing a hard hat and steel-toed boots and going out every day and sampling contaminated soil and water. And that experience has informed almost everything about my career. I decided about 3 years into that, I was much more interested in the practice of doing science and technology than I was in actually doing the science and technology. And that really led me to where I am today. So I went through various roles as a consultant, a policy analyst, a project manager. All of these are titles that can go well with an STS career. I found this job through networking and through consulting, and started as the second in command of my program about 14 years ago, and about 7 years ago I became the head of it. Everything I have done in my career has been STS related. I've done government consulting for most of my career before I actually joined the government. What opportunities am I aware of for people with graduate degrees in STS? It's really two paths that you can go that I've seen. One is kind of that administrative path that you've been hearing about, and one is the more kind of, I'll call it the technical scientific path. And a lot of that comes down to what your background is. And so in the government, everything comes down to what are called job series. And so if you are more kind of on the social science realm, you would be looking for job descriptions like program manager, program analyst, communications specialist, those types of management analyst, researcher. There are STS jobs across the federal government when the federal government is actually hiring that fall into those types of categories. If you are more on this, came from more the sciences role, so you started out, for example, in a degree like chemistry or biology or something like that, you might actually get into one of the scientific series. And they might just be very happy that you are kind of have that well-roundedness with the STS perspective, so you can put that technical work in a broader context, which is super important in government. So a lot of your career paths will be shaped by what surrounds the STS degree, not just the STS degree. Now, if you've gone right through school and you're getting a PhD right out of school, you kind of have to decide, what do I want to kind of campaign for in terms of the direction that I want to go in career path. What should grad students be doing now to acquire these skills? A lot of my colleagues have already alluded to it. I'll summarize it in outcomes and deliverables and impacts. Show that you know how to write. Show that you know how to get things done. And so there are a few examples of what people do. I write grants, I do program evaluations, those types of things. I run meetings. So I demonstrate the fact that you know how to conceptualize a project and then get it done. There's always a little bit of a concern in looking at the government that a PhD in particular is going to come in as sort of esoteric, theory-based, not be able to be grounded and actually deliver stuff. Show that you can describe your dissertation in 30 seconds or less. Demonstrate the fact that you have completed a project, that you ran something, you delivered something of value, and that you can explain it in plain language. So somebody who has no idea what you do can actually understand what you did, and not only what you did, why it mattered, what it was important to who cared about what you did, and how it made the world a better place. If you're going to work in the government, you got to be willing to work for anyone. So I started in the Obama administration. I served through Trump 1. In fact, I got promoted during Trump 1. Then I served through Biden, and now I'm serving through Trump again. And the reason I'm doing this at home right now with my art is I am on furlough right now. You have to be willing to be nonpartisan and to serve any administration that comes in, because your fidelity is to the process and to government and the Constitution. So my skill is, not only do you need to get outcomes and products, you have to be willing to serve anyone, to serve any administration that comes to the door. And unfortunately, I've lost folks at the end of every single administration because they came in thinking they would serve the values of a particular administration. And that's been the case throughout for both parties. And then they had a really hard time when a new party came in. So you have to be willing to serve the institution no matter who wins. And I think that's super important if you want to work for the government. I'm going to close there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jenny. So we're going to open it up to Q&A, and I just ask that you guys come up to the podium up here just for the ease of our speakers to see you while you ask the question. But yeah, I'm going to open up the floor. Go ahead.
Hi everyone. I really appreciate all your sharing, and since I'm also like in the late stage, first I'm Zhongyan Zhou from Taiwan, and I'm the 5th year's PhD candidate here. Since I'm in the late stage of my graduate school, so definitely looking for a job is kind of like a desperate thing for me at this point. So I just have one quick question to open up more discussion. So I'm just wondering, what's the things that you find the most challenging for some of you when you are switching between academic and like the industry, or academic and non-academics? Because I somehow feel like I probably spend too much time in the academia, and then I somehow forgot how to talk things in plain language, or how to just show other people I have the ability to get things done, or finish a project. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead,
I'll
Josh.
volunteer to take a stab at that, because I really liked what Jenny closed with that, because you have to be able to have some type of body of evidence of the work that you've done, and being able to convey the ideas and why they're relevant to somebody. In other words, read the room, and you'll go far. The one thing that I would really, I guess, blanket advice, which I hesitate to give, and I think it was Jenny that mentioned this as well, and it's something that is extremely important. I wrote it down and I didn't mention it myself. Is, what are your other skills besides what you learned in STS, and how do they combine into being a holistic you whenever you're presenting yourself to an organization, and how you're going to be adding value there? So it's not just necessarily, well, what can STS do for me? It's, what skills do I bring to the table, including the things that I've learned additively as a part of the education that I've had through Virginia Tech and the STS program. The other bit of blanket advice, particularly because I'm pretty much a science policy executive. This is what I do. I have 12 or 13 people that report to me within the organization, not all directly, thankfully, but you being able to explore a bunch of different things, you tend to want to be able to go to an area where you're capable of doing that. And the area that I'm most familiar with, like it or not, for better or for worse, is Washington, D.C. Because that's where I've spent essentially my entire career myself, even though I'm not located there. And I take great pains to make sure that I'm not, in a lot of ways, because I like to have the separation of my own life from what I would view as the DC bubble. And that's also a nonpartisan DC bubble too. The bubble is created and instantiated by whatever electorate or administration is in place. So they're fully on board with what Jenny said in terms of government employment. I've known, I do know a bunch of career civil servants, a lot of whom are, furloughed right now as well, and it's very, very unfortunate for them. But these are people that tend to be very, very hard workers and deep experts in their field. And reflecting on the reality of a regulated industry, that takes its toll in the private sector as well, because we can't get a hold of our government partners to talk through an issue. We just had a list of meetings that have been canceled, and these are important, valuable meetings for everybody. So it's important to be able to maintain that perspective. The other thing that I would say about Washington is that if you have a cause, there's an organization there for it, and they may need people there. DC is probably the most target-rich environment for somebody who's interested in a career in advocacy, irrespective of whether your interest is in pharmaceuticals or agriculture or forestry or whatever it may be. There is some group there. If you're a fan or a hated opponent of any specific industry, there will also be an organization there representing your interests. So do your research, and a lot of them, nonprofits and profits alike, will be able to see their way to you, as long as you're able to package yourself in the way that makes the most sense for them.
Does any of our other panelists have follow-ups to this question, or anything they would like to add? Okay. Do we have anybody else who has a question for our panelists?
Okay, hi. I have a question for Sam. First of all, thank you for sharing your experience. You are, I don't know, like a role model to me right now because I am an administrator too. I'm academic coordinator from a program in my country. So it's amazing to hear from someone that did his her PhD and now is in that position, right? One of the things that I find amazing of this program is the possibility to broaden my understanding of what our students need, not only in thematics, but how the teach that we are teaching them are influencing the perception of their careers and their outcomes as a professionals. So you say that you can apply your knowledge of the PhD to the curriculum structure, but I have the question of what challenges have you faced doing that, to applying the principle of STS to curriculum changes?
So just to make sure I understand, your question is, what challenges have I had as an STSer applying the principles of STS to things like programmatic frameworks, curriculum development?
Yes, exactly.
That's such a good question. Oh man. I feel like I'm gonna have a better answer at like 3 a.m. I'll wake up and I'll be like, oh, I know just what to say. I also just want to say that as somebody who's already an academic coordinator, you have like way more know-how about how to get a job like this than I did going into it. So congratulations. Yeah, I think so. Here's something. When I started at Tufts, I was split actually between the STS program there. They have an STS undergraduate program and the Civic Studies program as a program manager. And the STS program there is like so different from the one here. It's a lot of anthropologists. Historians are like way at the other side of the university. Uh, yeah, not like much philosophy. Like the history and the philosophy departments, they're very, very separate. And of course, like they're separate here too, but I feel like there's more sort of like history and philosophy here, whereas in the undergraduate program at Tufts, there's not a lot. I mean, we do cross-list some courses from those programs, but I think I found like, oh, like I'm a really different kind of STSer than the STS identifying people here. Which was actually kind of a challenge. Actually, I found it more challenging to manage the STS program there than I do to manage the Civic Studies program for that reason. And another thing I'll say, just like, yeah, just being a bit vulnerable about it. It's really hard to like go from being perceived as an expert in something and then like working for the program that like has your area of expertise, but not being perceived as an expert by the people in that program. Like when I think like going from having a doctorate to being staff at a university, not everybody perceives you as not having expertise, but a lot of people do. And I really felt that. And it was a challenge to not let that demoralize me. Like, and to make my opinions and expertise known about the things that I knew that they applied to, you know, like to find my voice. I think it took me a while to know when to be like, I'm going to speak my mind here and say the thing that I know is true from both like my academic and like my moral background and from my heart. And when to sort of withdraw a bit and like protect myself. I think it's a balance, but I would advocate like if you continue in the administrative route, don't let anyone make you feel like you're not an expert. You are, like, you belong. Stand your ground in the space. Like, say you're an expert. Don't let anyone put you in your place. That's a skill that I like kind of had to develop. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you all for the great talk. I just have a quick question. All these administrative positions require you to be American citizen. So I wonder what would be your advice, and can we even like consider pursuing this path, or like what would be your advice? Thank you.
For me, just go to Washington, D.C. There's lots of organizations there that have a lot of international employees.
Yeah, there are lots of international staff at Tufts too.
I suspect, and I don't want to speak for, I was just looking at Jenny's answer there. Yeah. And it differs, of course, by different administrations, but there are a lot of organizations that would I think want to take advantage of that international perspective and experience. Just have to find the right one. This is rich coming from a guy who's been in the same organization for 22 years, right? That's probably longer than most of the people in the room have been alive, all right? So I have suits that are older than many of you. So, but patience is always important, and being able to listen and being able to engage in that conversation going forward with anybody.
Thank you.
Okay. So I have a question in here from Daniel. I think Jennifer answered it, but I'm just going to open it up to the whole panel because I have a follow-up question to this as well. But Daniel just asks, if you were to start grad school now, what would you do differently? What courses would you take that you didn't take, and what kind of connections would you have sought out? And my kind of connection question to this is, did you plan on going into these more non-academic roles when you were going through school, or was this after the fact did you decide to start going into more non-academic careers?
So I'm echoing. Okay, I would say figure out how to use R or Python, like use some sort of coding language. Just do it. It's dumb. Or become really good at pivot tables. Like have some type of like data management skill that you can pull out of your back pocket and impress the director of your nonprofit organization who hasn't been in Excel in 10 years. Like come up with a practical skill that's transportable, that you can sort of say, I can think deeply, but I can also like do data analysis really quick, or I can build a web scraper quick. Like have your yes and. I think that when I have hired folks, I look for two qualities. Can you think in depth about a problem, and can you work at the speed we need you to work? Since we are a research shop, we have very strict timelines. I have a budget. I give you the hours that you have to do the project. It has to get done within those hours. if I have any doubts about you being able to like accomplish that project, that screws up my whole budget. So think about how like you can take skills and make them applicable and work quickly. Sorry, I'm getting some sound issues and I don't know if people are hearing them, but find your yes and sell that to someone as to how you can work it effectively in their environment, because that's the number one thing I look for when I'm hiring.
I couldn't agree more with that. That's on point. In the civic engagement space, at least, which is a great space, I highly recommend it. I think it encompasses civic studies, but there are also just a lot of people who care about civic engagement, and that's like its own world. People really care about program evaluation. I had no idea because I didn't like know that I was going to be in this space. This was all just a happy accident. I just like said yes to things at the right time and did what was right for me, and here I am. But program evaluation is such an important skill to have if you're going to be in that space.
So could I add something really quick?
Yeah.
That program evaluation is always in need and people always want to fund it, and it's so boring. It's like the most boring thing that you can do. And if you're doing it the way public policy people want you to do it, it's even more boring. So sometimes like you have to do the really, really boring things, but you can always find creative twists to it. Like we're doing a program evaluation on a funding program right now, and it's a new funding program. It's not an area where there are a lot of established outcomes or outputs, and we've basically been able to pivot this into like building a data capacity toolkit for people who have been funded for this program. Like you can do creative and exciting things within the really, really boring parameters that some of this work is. Sorry, it's really boring.
I'm going to give a plug for program evaluation. I was a consultant for like 12 years, and most of what I did was program evaluation and giving advice. And STS, I wrote it in the chat, allows you to really be a participant observer in pretty much any environment you go in. The ability to abstract, to zoom out, to see the dynamics, who's included, who isn't, where's the power, where's not the power, how does all of that work, will usually reveal everything you need to know in a program evaluation. So it's, as I agree, it's boring, but in the government, that can translate into a pretty good job with something like an Office of Inspector General, so OIG offices. I know that doesn't sound like a traditional place for STS, but it's a very practical way to have a really good impact and, by the way, make some money doing it.
And if it's okay, Jenny, I'm going to read what you wrote in the chat too. Just because. Okay, sorry about that. Just because not everybody has access to the chat. So Jenny also said, for this previous question, I would have finished faster. I would have worked full time, and it took me 9 years. I was working full time, and then no changes to the courses or approaches. It was a fabulous curriculum, and I appreciated the flexibility. And then the other thing that you wrote, Jenny, is that STS tends to develop strong zoom out skills, which if you don't mind elaborating on that, which are superpowers in progress and evaluation. If you don't mind elaborating on that.
Yeah, I think in any job, it's really easy to get very emotionally involved in what's happening and to take sides and see somebody is right or wrong. Most important in my job that STS has given me is a fundamental intellectual predisposition to zooming out, to appreciating that every perspective is valid and that most things are driven by power. And so if you're able to step back and put whatever happens in context, it is a great way of being objective about about your own work. So the worst thing that's happened to me in my job is I've been accused of facilitating farmer suicides by setting certain standards in the organic space. And that was really hard and really personal to hear. And it took a little bit to step back and say, okay, this is somebody who is perceiving an imbalance in the power dynamic. And is that accurate, and how do I fix it? Or how do I approach it, or how do I talk about it, or how do I rebalance the system if the system is indeed rebalanced? So it is when you're doing program evaluations, the ability to be objective and look broadly is a superpower. It is the only thing that has kept me sane over the last 14 years.
That's also the political maelstrom that we're in today, too. That unfortunate Jenny's experience with that, but not uncommon.
Okay, so we got a question from Matt.
Is this on, or do I have to hit the button? It's working. Okay, first I just want to say thank you all. I'm getting emotional here just listening to the amazing things that STS grads are doing out in the world. And Jenny said that that's because we're doing everything right. I find that hard to believe as somebody who spends their time evaluating what's going on. So what I would really love to know is what the four of you maybe think we got wrong, or what we ought to do better, and how to make it right.
I am not generally known for my quiet opinions at work or anywhere else, but Matt, obviously no place is perfect, but my experience, and mine might be different because I was in the Northern Virginia campus too, along with a lot of people that were similarly situated career-wise, as I was. So I think it was the strongest graduate program that I have been involved in. And I don't really have a specific thing, it was an excellent experience for me. I don't have a critique, actually. I think that probably, if there was one, look, this is one of the previous questions about academic versus non-academic or administrative careers, et cetera. I have been glancing off an academic career for the better part of a quarter century. And, I was in, I was out, I was in, I was out. And then whenever I decided I wanted to be in, I was no longer welcome to some extent. An anonymous survey, maybe. We Janet and myself and Ashley and a few others that were involved in my pathway there, we put our heads together trying to find ways of finding me into full-time academic position, probably at a school of business. It hasn't worked out that way, but that's not because of the program. It's because of my own personal circumstances, where if you want an academic career, you have to be willing to pick up stakes and move. And I wasn't. I have obligations here in Pennsylvania, and I just couldn't do that. So I was pretty limited geographically to, say, within a 3-hour radius of, between Pittsburgh and DC. So that wasn't the fault of the program, though. That we took a shot, and to quote a figure that came up in my dissertation quite often, Herbert Simon, satisficing my career was essentially what has happened.
For me, Amanda went off mute first.
Go
Amanda,
ahead. Go ahead, Jen. I'll take a stab at this, and I will say I think this is a field critique and not a department critique. STS leaves graduates with a viewpoint. And I think that viewpoint is a very effective one for stepping into public policy spaces, community development spaces, that it gives you a flexibility of mind that is very appreciated in spaces. And I feel like I'm able to move between communities to politicians to faith leaders very effectively. And I think it's because of sort of the viewpoint that everyone's contributing something. Where I think STS sort of fails as a discipline is we don't have something sellable, right? Like I can't pitch doing STS work to a client, right? Like in the way that I can pitch doing program evaluation, or that I can pitch doing sort of data support and projects. Like I can bring those viewpoints into what I do, but I don't have a product that sells one way or another. And I think that there is work to be done that bridges the sort of formal research, like an NSF grant that you might get trained to write, to the sort of applied, this is what this is in practice, and this is why people want to give you money to do it. And I apologize if that's like a cynical viewpoint, but if we had a thing that we did and we sold, I could probably create a business line at my organization for it pretty easily. But I don't know what that is right now.
So super briefly, I texted in, I agree that STS is a little bit too abstract for people to understand. And that highlights the need to be able to describe what you're interested in and what you're good at in 30 seconds or less. So who cares? So if you can't describe the field, describe what you do and what you bring to the table in 30 seconds or less. That's sort of the antidote to the abstraction of it all. You know, I have to sing, I'm going to sing the praises of this program. I searched for a long time for a PhD program that was part-time, and they are few and far between. And I had to do that in order to keep my full-time job. And, you know, for folks, pragmatically, that offers a PhD path that many people wouldn't have. And so I am eternally grateful for that. I'm also eternally grateful for just the breadth and the understanding that you trust the process and it will play out. Very quick story, because Janet's on the screen. She assigned a book on developing concrete standards, and it was a particularly busy time at work. And I thought to myself, why in God's name am I reading a book on concrete standards? And yet it shapes almost everything I do almost every day in shaping organic standards in terms of how you think about standards, why they're there, the value of them, the groups that have to align in order to develop standards. So trust the process, value the process, because you never know, what one book or one conversation is going to be kind of very grounding literally a decade from now. And I think about that a lot. And I think that's one of the really unique aspects of the Virginia Tech program.
I have a quick thing to add too. I agree with everything that Amanda and Jennifer have said. I think I would really like to see the STS department, and just like more departments and programs in the humanities in general, like articulate the things that they're teaching students in terms of skills, because they are skills. It's just like I didn't know how to say that they were skills until now, like 6 years into administrative work. I wrote a few down. I would call them curiosity about bureaucratic processes and a willingness to understand them and move through them, patience with people who think differently because they have different institutional incentives, strong organizational skills and a vigilance about keeping your calendar, a willingness to be annoying and persistent when things need to be done with yourself too, as much as with other people, and a tendency to document everything you do so you and other people remember it, and learning how to manage up. I think like those are almost all of those are skills that you learn when writing a humanities dissertation.
Thank you all so much for this amazing conversation. I'm going to ask a very on-brand question and say, so some of you have mentioned networks. And so I'm just sitting here thinking about whether networks are relationships, and if they're not, how are they different? what is the difference between networks and relationships? And are relationships important? Could you say something maybe about building, developing, maintaining relationships with people? And if you think that's a skill, if it's a skill that we teach or could do better, or if you could just say maybe some words about that.
Oh,
the echo to stop.
hey, Amanda, just real quick. I'm sorry. There's something wrong with your connection. Do you mind? We kind of didn't get anything you just said.
Sure. I think that frequently networking is framed as a very nebulous thing. That it's like, go to a conference and talk to people, or like go to an event and talk to people. And talking to people is really good. But I actually think showing up is far, far more important. And knowing what showing up means within the environment that you are either trying to break into or you're trying to maintain and build relationships in. So in practice, for me, that's going to a lot of like community meetings and neighborhood meetings and just showing up and being present and asking questions. Like that's sort of what I have to do in my role in order to maintain my network. And some of that is relationships. And when you're in kind of a public facing job, you have relationships with people who fund you. You have relationships with people who have political power over you. And you have relationships with people who, like, if they don't like you, could take you down a few pegs. So you have to like manage and understand those relationships. And I think you sort of assessing where you fit in that and where you want to go and who your peers are is some of the most important work that you can do. So I'm going to give a concrete example, which really only works from my position as a director, is there's only so many directors of nonprofits or similar organizations in Baltimore. And anytime one gets hired, I take them out to coffee and I'm like, this is going to be a year of your life that's going to be a whirlwind. And I just say, like, I'm here to support you. And I'm here to like talk shit if you need to like talk shit to people. And I'm just here to like be a like whatever you need in that. And that's been a really effective way for me to maintain my relationship with my peers in this. And there are other ways at different levels to do that work. I encourage my staff to find people doing the same things at organizations and do the same thing. Understand what projects they're working on. Understand like what they're doing in Baltimore. Like that's like important to do. And I think being active about that, even though it can be really scary to do that, is the most important thing you can do in sort of balancing that network versus relationship line. Because sometimes you can have relationships with people like directly and they'll be your friends and you can text them. And sometimes you can't because they have a certain degree of power over you, your career, or like how your work can travel. The press is like a really good example of that. I love our data reporters in Baltimore and I am quite friendly with them, but they are not who I go out to beers with. They are who I tell select information to, but you know, you have to sort of manage that and figure it out.
Okay, so we have from Janet in the chat. She just mentions, I'd like to point out that your 4 dissertations collectively have been downloaded 7,139 times, so that research has not gone unnoticed either.
I'm kind of the numbers nerd on that, but it's not gone just because you're not in academia.
I think I have a comment about the networks and relationships thing. Somebody once told me that nobody really gets any kind of job or important position without like having an in. I think that's true. And I think something that being an academic can kind of falsely lead you to believe is that if you just work hard enough, like people will notice and it'll be amazing and they'll commend you and they'll give you all the raises and all of the promotions, and it just doesn't work like that. Self-advocacy is so important. And also, I think like building, in terms of like building relationships with people who can open up networks for you, I can't stress enough the importance of finding mentors. Like mentorship doesn't just end when you leave a PhD program. You'll need to find mentors like outside of grad school. And I think being able to like identify who has your best interest at heart, who's going to give you advice that's not BS and like and not lead you down like unnecessary roads. It's really important to like figure out who you can build a mentorship relationship with. I happen to have like amazing mentorship at the College of Civic Life where I work, and it's part of why I'm there and why I've stayed there. Yeah, and I think it's because like the college itself has like an ethos that aligns with me. So yeah, there's something about a personal mission statement that's like really effective in finding your relationships that will open up larger networks for you.
Okay. Does anybody else have some questions for our panelists?
Just one last thing that came to mind with the relationship aspect. And again, I'm going to rely on my longevity, such as it is. You can't do what I do without being able to have relationships. I report to a multitude of boards of directors, and I have a multitude of people reporting to me. Some of the people on my team have been with me for almost as long as I've been in the organization. So if you want to have a cadre of people who are devoted to that mission for the organization and enjoy working with you, you have to be at least rudimentary likable, and having some degree of insight into the work, because what you're doing, we've been talking a lot about administering here, but in essence, what we all do in some shape, way, or form is lead. And if you're leading somebody, you often have to lead from the front, you have to lead from the side, you have to lead from behind, you have to be adaptable under those circumstances. And whenever you're working with a diverse population, I have people who are doctors, people who are lawyers, people from all over the world. I have direct reports in Europe in our European office. So being able to meet somebody where they are and being able to have a conversation with them and being able to share in the work and in the hardship and in the victories and everything like that, that's both networking and relationships. I don't necessarily think that there are different perspectives on both of those things, but it's hard to separate one from the other. They're kind of entwined.
Hello, I'm Oliver. I'm a fourth year. And I was wondering, so when you're a student, you get a lot of advice from a lot of different people. Sometimes the advice conflicts with other pieces of advice you get. Matt is my chair, and he always tells me that you don't have to take every piece of advice that you get. So I was wondering how you all figure out what pieces of advice to accept And well, yes.
Always listen to Matt.
I listen
Yeah.
to everything Matt says, obviously. But I was wondering how you delineate between like what advice you do take and what advice you kind of accept but move on from, to be nice about it.
I'm going to make the comment. This is your life. You have to choose what to do with it. I had tremendous pressure to stay in academia. I came from a long line of teachers and academics. Almost everybody in my family has a PhD. They all stayed in the academy, and they have no idea what I do every day. And they still have just a little bit of disdain for the fact that I didn't stay in academia. This is your life. You've got to pick what you want to do. I love my life. I love my career. I feel like I'm having an impact on the world. And the advice I got was almost all about, well, you got to stay in academia. I got advice. I wanted to do STS as an undergrad. And I was told, oh, no, don't do that. You have to get a scientific degree before you're capable or qualified to go into STS. You have to be a scientist before you can be an STSer. That was in the early 1990s. And I bought into it and I'm lost. I mean, I hate to say it that way because it sounds bad, but I really felt like for a while I lost a few years of my life of pursuing a path that was other people's paths and not mine. Find yourself fast. It is your life. And parents, educators, mentors, they will all have a perspective on what you should do. Make your life your own.
Josh, you want to go?
I was just going to say, when the student is ready, the teacher arrives. And your mileage may vary with any bit of advice that I give or that anybody else gives. I think that, you kind of have to keep in mind everybody's perspective on it. And this is from a DC operator that's been in circulation for a long time. You also have to look what's into it for them, right? So that's pretty key. And that goes back to the networking relationship element as well. So yeah, if you're getting advice from somebody, the old slogan, at least from the MBA courses, is to say what kind of house they live in or what kind of car they drive, right? And see if their advice is worth anything and whether they've taken it or not. But I think that that's a little bit cynical, not entirely removed from reality. But study and observe the person's character that's giving you the advice. Or is this somebody that you look to for leadership and guidance, and their character is such that you trust them? And you understand that their advice may not be relevant now, but it might damn well be 5 years down the road.
I'm going to counter this question about advice with some advice, which is you're in like the thick of it right now. And you've spent a lot of time like trying to figure out like what's my academic identity and like what does that mean to me, and you probably like feel that really, really deeply, and it's really challenging to step away from that. So I would deeply encourage you to like take out a pen and a piece of paper and like write down what your mission statement is. Like think of yourself as like what your academic like business is. Like what's your mission statement? What do you do? Who do you serve? What's the purpose? And then the next step beyond that is like a rubric. So if you get advice, how does that fit into that rubric? Like, does it prioritize like the things that mean a lot to me? Does it speak to my mission? Is this something that helps me get further within this framework that I have? That's like something I have to do for my organization all the time, which is like, is this project or this ask aligned with who we are as an organization? And I think you can do that as a person who's studying and researching things and existing in the academy. And when you have those guardrails, it makes sort of filtering out what advice is meaningful and not to you much more effectively when you know and can articulate those guardrails. And in fact, you do know them. You just need to like write them down and make them visible to you. And then it's easy to know who to ignore or what to ignore. No, it did not, Matt. Not at all. Sorry, Matt in the chat put that the boring evaluation work paid off, and no, not a little bit.
Hi. Just we only have a few minutes, but like Matt, I'm thinking kind of systematically and kind of in terms of department practice. So this panel is part of our thinking about how to bring these questions and to facilitate our students finding these non-academic careers. So a lot of the approach here is very individualized in terms of here's advice, here's how you can sort of structure your trajectory, and here are the things that you should be doing to prepare. I was just wondering if you have any advice or thoughts for the department in terms of how we can better facilitate our students' movement into non-academic careers. You know, in a lot of traditional disciplines, they have existing career networks and job fairs. I'm not saying that we're going to have a job fair, but you know, just those are kind of more institutional services. And I was just wondering if you have thoughts on what we might do to facilitate that. Thanks. And it's nice to see you all.
We've talked a lot about skills. We've also talked about experience and know-how. There's really only one way to get that, and that's to move forward in time, which we were all doing, whether we want to or not. I think that probably in terms of concrete things, at least from my own observations and working in my organization and witnessing a lot of organizations that we're a part of, communication skills, being able to speak in public, being able to write clearly and effectively. All of these things are critically important. Jenny and I think more so than Sam and Amanda, I might be wrong about this, but we had a lot of groundwork in a career prior to our doctoral program. And so, you know, within the department, particularly in different campuses, there are going to be people with different professional backgrounds and different experience. So, but I would say that if you can encourage people to brush up, and all of us have said this, being able to convey ideas effectively and efficiently is 70% of the job of persuasion.
For me, it's really big that you guys are normalizing non-academic jobs by having events like this. So don't underestimate the importance of the little steps. I've been on this panel now a few times over the past few years, and I just think it's lovely that you invite that conversation. This is a form of networking. I am on LinkedIn, and for folks who are interested in being connected, I have a very kind of broad network, so feel free to connect. I'm not hard to find if you type in Jennifer Tucker Organic, and those do matter in terms of knowing where people are. Sometimes networking is just as simple as congratulating somebody on getting a new job or saying, hey, I know you've been in your job for a little while. Can I just chat with you about what you're doing? I'm fascinated. That kind of thing. So I appreciate Virginia Tech kind of opening up this dialogue for us to be here. It's been a real pleasure.
I just sent the LinkedIn importune to you, Jenny.
When I came to BINIA, we had an existing NSF grant that was data science core, and I can't remember what program area it was actually in. But fundamentally, the idea behind this program was to pair computer science undergrads with nonprofits in Baltimore City to help them work on data issues. Now that grant had like a ton of problems with it. Like nonprofits are really bad at managing their data, but the last thing you want is like an undergrad stepping all over that either. So it was a real push and pull with that. That said, I think if STS can articulate the practitioner perspective, what they do and how they can serve particular domain areas, I think that there's, I don't know if NSF would do this anymore, but I think that there's sort of that career development potential there of sort of figuring out how do you pair graduate students in sort of interdisciplinary or hybrid sectors. I think the other version of that is what my undergrad did, which was just like fieldwork term, which was just, hey, you have to go out for 7 weeks and work in the world, and it can really be doing whatever for those 7 weeks, but you have to like step out of the bubble. And I think that something like that built into the curriculum for graduate students could be very effective, which is to just say, like, you don't have a specific career out of this, right? Like you might hope it's in academia, but maybe you need to spend like a few months with a nonprofit embedded, or you need to like go to your state capital and learn what like advocacy is and like the work that they do and like what going to session is and talking to legislators, like doing that work for a bit and figuring how that builds into the curriculum. Those would be my 2 suggestions.
Yeah. Along those lines, when I managed the STS program at Tufts, I ran the lunch seminar series there for about 5 years, which is a lot like this. And I started trying to find speakers who were not academics at all, actually, but who I think did something like the politics of knowledge, or like navigating institutional structures in ways that are STS-y. Like, for instance, there was a group called the Salem Alliance for the Environment. They're really cool. Look them up. They're in Salem, Massachusetts. They've worked really hard to advocate for clean energy in the Port of Salem. And they navigated and won something called a Community Benefits Agreement, or a CBA. And those are really interesting in general. I recommend looking into them. And yeah, invited them, and they just talked about what it was like to do that. All of the community meetings they had to go to, all of the stakeholders that they had to interact with. And it was like deeply STS-y. And I think it showed students that like STS does just live in the world. Like STS is in everything. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much to the speakers. I'm gonna we're gonna go ahead and end the session right now, but I just wanted to ask you all if you would be open, because I know I have some questions, but if anybody else has questions, do you mind if we reach out to you at all? Okay, awesome. Thank you all so much. So let's go ahead and give our speakers a round of applause, and thank you all for this great conversation.
Great to see you. Bye.